Excellent. Thank you so much, Leili and Josh. Y'all did a really good job. I really appreciated learning more about environmental justice, environmental racism happening here in the United States. Josh, would you mind turning off your PowerPoint?
Yeah, no, of course.
So there was a little bit of internet connectivity issue. We couldn't always clearly hear you, Josh, unfortunately. So I did want you to, could you re-go over the Ohio train derailment and the Flint water crisis just a little bit?
The central idea of that slide and what I was talking about was that there was a disproportionate response from the local and federal government as a result of both of those accidents. In the case of the Ohio train derailment, it occurred in a predominantly white community, and the issue was taken care of almost immediately. And in Michigan, which is the racial demographic there is 55% African American, the local and federal government both ignored the issue. And by the time they responded to it, it had impacted thousands of residents. I believe it's 8,000 children. And I just wanted to make a point to I guess, recognize the disparity in the response from the supporting government.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I thought that was like a really poignant example, of what's happening right now in our country, because I think like you've given us these kind of two examples and like obviously the different responses. But is this something that's just happening, here in Flint, or it just happened in Ohio? Is there other instances of this going on today, like right now in the U.S.?
I don't have any off the top of my head, and I don't want to misattribute this phenomenon to another event. But I would say definitely, yeah, there are other instances of it. I just don't want to name any and be wrong about that.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Leili, do you want to answer that? Or was there any other kind of examples of environmental injustice that you wanted to talk about that you didn't get to mention?
Let's see. I think one example that we did want to touch on, this is kind of a common, like this is something that everyone knows about, Hurricane Katrina. That happened a few years ago. A lot of the communities that were impacted were closer to the coast. So those were mainly like Black communities, and the response for them was similar. Like it wasn't the same as it was for white communities that were given a lot more attention in terms of like kind of recovering from that incident. And a lot of those people were interviewed and saying that they didn't really have the means or the resources to kind of like move out to kind of adapt, move out of those areas as it was happening. So I guess that's a pretty well-known example too. That, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And then while Josh was talking earlier, it kind of cut out a little bit, and he had made the point that the waste in Ohio, it's actually being shipped to Houston, and it's being shipped basically from this white community in Ohio, and it's now being shipped and disposed of into these really deep wells in Houston. And this is happening in largely a Latino community in Houston. And this is kind of common where a lot of our waste products are being shipped to Houston and other places where we're exporting a lot of our waste to communities of color. And you mentioned as well in the global South. So it's not really a question. It was just, I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of got that part of what Josh was saying, because I thought it was really important. And it looks like we do have some questions in the chat. So let me ask those. Could you explain more about the global South and global North is the question.
Yes. So basically, like I know our presentation was pretty focused on the US, but that was just a point I wanted to emphasize, that like it's kind of known that the global North is more responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. So that includes like the US, Canada, Europe, places like that, that are kind of richer countries. So they consume a lot more, they emit a lot more. So compared to the global South, like South America, Africa, Asia, so southern parts of Asia, that kind of, they don't really consume as much as we do, but they're facing, because of geography, because of power dynamics, they're kind of experiencing effects a lot more. Like even like changes in temperature, like the 2 degrees like increase, like people closer to the equator like are gonna feel those effects a lot more. So it's kind of since they're not represented in like the climate conferences like COP26 or whatever, but like it's kind of it sucks that their voices aren't being heard because they are experiencing the effects a lot more than we are. It's just kind of being ignored by us.
Did you want to add anything to that, Josh? He probably does, but it looks like
no, I think
here we go. Oh, you're good. Okay.
they did great covering it. I mean, I think.
Yeah, sorry,
hear me?
Josh. Yeah, we can like hear you, but it's like in and out. So it's just, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Like let's see.
No, yeah.
You're good. Okay. And then let's see, we have another question here. This person is asking, do you think that the biggest discrepancy is socioeconomic more than race nowadays? And I can, give a little bit of a answer to that question, and y'all are also welcome to as well. I think this is where you want to talk about intersectionality. It's not necessarily like a competition between, I guess, what is the most like the biggest discrepancy. But I think it's very clear with like the history of our country, the history of the world, that race is a very important determining factor. And you can kind of see when you study things that your race can be more powerful in the outcomes that are going to happen to you than your economic status, especially here in the United States. That's a lot of things that you can kind of get into. I think intersectionality is probably the way to really think about that. And I don't know if y'all want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that's basically that's I completely agree. I mean, we're not trying to undermine the impacts that lower income communities in the US are facing because they're really similar. A lot of those groups also overlap. It's just we just wanted to focus on in this presentation on race and minority communities, but definitely socioeconomic status is also a big thing with like, and I guess you wouldn't call it environmental racism. It's just, but it is very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about it is like things are overlapping. If you are living in poverty, then you're going to be facing a lot of different challenges than if you're not. And then, based on what the color of your skin is, and here in the United States, we have a racial system, so it's also going to limit your chances in different ways as well. And on the flip side, for someone like me who's a white male, I have extra privileges for being a white male that that would be unearned just because of my skin color. So that's kind of a way that you can kind of think about it. Is your life's easier based on what your skin color is in the United States, typically. Is there any other questions that anyone has in the chat? It looks like those are all the chat questions. And I think this is also just something that we could also think a little bit more about too, is you mentioned that we're not talking about like racism in terms of attitudes and beliefs and like someone's personal discrimination. So let's say I were to use a slur against somebody, right? Like that's not what we're talking about here. Could you talk a little bit more about like what we're like, the actual structural kind of systemic racism?
I can take it. I don't know if Josh is like his internet connection is good enough to like answer, right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Josh, maybe turn your video off. That might help.
Okay, is that any better?
Yeah, I should have told you that a while ago. I can hear you better now. Or not. Maybe Leili, you want to try to answer this and Josh can jump in.
Yeah. So just to make sure you were asking,
okay,
like,
cool.
All right.
No, Leili, go ahead.
Yeah, just to make sure you're just asking that this is not like individual beliefs, right? Just kind of explaining that a little bit more. Yeah. So this is just environmental racism is like a very deep issue, like deep-rooted issue, especially in the US where there's a long history of like colonization and racism, gentrification, redlining, all that. So it's really not individual people in the US that are being racist against these, like that is a completely different issue. This is basically just like systemic racism, like just kind of how in our country, like racism is kind of integral to like socioeconomic systems and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to dismantle a lot of those beliefs. And that's why policymakers aren't really like attacking this too strongly, because this goes back so far. It's kind of hard to dismantle something that's so old. So yeah, not at all. This isn't like individual beliefs or anything. This is definitely bigger. It's a bigger issue than all of us for sure.
Awesome. And Josh, I don't know if we can hear you, but if you do want to add anything, you could definitely feel free to type anything you wanted to in the chat. But yeah, I just wanted to definitely get that across. I think you explained it really well, Leili, especially in kind of today's day and age. We focus a lot on like culture and kind of trying to create like kind of culture wars between people. And that's not what we're trying to focus on as a person's individual beliefs or things like that. We're looking at actual outcomes that you can kind of view, and based on what your kind of status is, you're going to have different outcomes that are going to happen to you. So I think that's really important. And then also one of our guests here actually said, I believe that race is so intertwined with socioeconomic status and for so long that it does remain a race issue. And I think, that's a good point. All of this is definitely really intertwined, and it is still really important that we do think about how race does impact things in the United States, and not overlook that. So I think it's really important that we continue this conversation, and I want to thank both of you for bringing all this information to our attention, and for really presenting this really well. Do y'all have any concluding thoughts that you want to share? I'm just going to share my screen real quick so you can kind of see what we have next, but feel free if you have any concluding thoughts.
I just like quickly want to thank y'all for coming to this, because I think this is a really important conversation to have. So the fact that you guys are here and listening is really cool. So feel free to just kind of talk about this with your friends and family and stuff. I mean, it's not a fun conversation to have, but I think it's an important one for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's not always a fun conversation, but it's important. It's necessary. We have to keep talking about this if we do want to make the world a better place for all of us. And when we do make the world a better place for all of us, we're talking about people of color in our country and the world. But when we're trying to make environmental justice better for those folks, we make the environment better for all of us, and more justice for all of us at the end of the day. So it's really important. We're all doing this to make the world better for us and for the future. And let's keep on this conversation. We're going to actually learn more about culture and climate and how to actually talk about it. Just some tips to have these kind of difficult conversations. That's going to be tomorrow at 12:30. Adi and Fungan are going to be leading us on that talk. So hopefully we will see you there, and collect your 5 more code words, and hopefully we'll see a few more folks. You can invite your friends. But thank you all so much for your time and for your attention. And thank you again, Leili and Josh. Great job. I'm looking forward to the next talk. Seeing you all tomorrow. Take care, everyone.